And now, from the University of Virginia Center for Politics.
My name is Damon Irby, and I'm the Director of Global Initiatives at the University of Virginia Center for Politics. Welcome to the Global Perspectives on Democracy Programs Ambassador Series. It's my honor today to welcome His Excellency Nguyen Quoc Dung. Ambassador of Vietnam to the United States. And also alongside him is Professor Emeritus Harry Harding. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Professor Harding, yes. Professor Harding will moderate the Q&A portion of the program, so we really appreciate you being here. Thank you. And a special thanks to Professor PQ Hung. PQ has been a driving force behind our event today, our planning. So PQ, where are you right now? Raise up your hand. Oh, he's still behind it. We're going to recognize him when he comes in the room, so let's not forget that. We appreciate him. So the first contact that occurred between representatives of the U.S. and Vietnam took place virtually at the very beginning of our country's history. And of course, who other than Thomas Jefferson would have been a part of that encounter? While serving in Paris as the U.S. Minister to France, Jefferson in 1787 had an opportunity to meet with Prince Kang. Now, when you think of a prince, you might think of somebody who has been around a long time and has a great experience. Well, this prince, he was a young prince of 7 years old. And he was there in Paris representing his father and trying to build ties to help restore the monarchy to Vietnam. Well, one problem we had in especially the southern parts of the United States is like waterborne diseases. And one element that added to that were rice grown in very swampy areas. So Thomas Jefferson had learned about a highland variety of rice grown in Vietnam. And he was distinctly interested in marrying this Vietnamese version of rice to an American variety so that it would help mitigate future disease outbreaks in our country. So we know that they got together and discussed and worked towards getting this variety of rice to the United States. I'm not sure I don't know if it's 100% certain what the final outcome was, but the first opportunity for our countries came to fruition in that very early engagement in Paris. So today, at the University of Virginia, we continue to have many engagements with Vietnam. We most recently in January had a travel course led by Professor Spencer Phillips, who is, I believe, here today. And he led a group to, the class was entitled Vietnam and Ecological Economic Exploration. And he is now planning another class to Vietnam called Hanoi's Hong River, Development, Climate, and Rights to the City. So the professor and some of his students, I believe, are here today. Thank you. I also want to recognize in our group today, we have some very engaged high school students who are part of the Blue Ridge, Virginia Governor's School. So for those who are here today, thank you for really being engaged students. We appreciate you wanting to learn more about Vietnam and from our important guest. So a lot has occurred between 1787 and now, and we're excited to learn all about that from the ambassador today. Ambassador Nguyen Quoc Dung has served in the Vietnamese Foreign Service for over 30 years in a wide range of roles and has extensive experience in international integration, bilateral and multilateral diplomacy, international economic affairs, and human resource management and development. He was appointed as the 7th ambassador of Vietnam to the United States in January of 2022. And prior to being ambassador to the United States, he served as Vietnam's deputy foreign minister, beginning in 2016. He previously served as the ambassador to Hungary, which was also accredited to Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Albania. Of course, there are numerous other roles that he has done over the years. Mr. Ambassador, your service is truly remarkable. And so following Ambassador Zung's presentation, he'll be joined by Professor Harry Harding, a UVA University Professor Emeritus and Professor Emeritus of Public Policy. Professor Harding is a specialist on Asia and U.S.-Asia relations and has extensive experience with Vietnam. He also served as the founding dean of UVA's Frank Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy and is a senior fellow at the Miller Center for Public Affairs. Professor Harding will moderate the Q&A portion of today's program. Professor Harding, thank you again. And before we skip forward, I do want to go back and recognize Professor P.Q. Hung, who just walked in. Professor Hung. So as we proceed, the ambassador has plenty of time scheduled for Q&A, and I encourage each of you to be thinking of what questions you might like to ask the ambassador. So ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce you to His Excellency, Ambassador Zung. Thank you.
Thank you. So good evening, everybody, professors, provost, Mr. Deputy Provost, and thank you so much, Professor Yopi, for your introductions, and especially for the very interesting story about Thomas Jefferson's connection with Vietnam. And you can see that President Jefferson was very far-sighted when he was interested in rice, Vietnamese rice. Now, you know, Vietnam is the world's second largest rice exporter. And you know, another story that, you know, Jefferson wrote declarations, American independent declarations. And in 1945, when we got independence, our president, Ho Chi Minh, quoted him in his declaration, in his independent declarations. Yeah. So that's why I'm so proud, I'm so thrilled to be here, and thank you so much for the opportunity to visit the university and meeting with so many esteemed, distinguished professors here, and also with students here. You know, I also appreciate very much the University of Virginia for what you have done for Vietnam and for VietnamUS relations so far. You know, I learned with pride that there are so many Vietnamese professors and Vietnamese students who are working and studying here in this university. And so did many American friends of mine, like Daniel Grissom-Ring, Assistant Secretary of State, a friend of the Provost here. And I know that his daughter also studying here. Yeah. All right, that's, so kudos to you, dear professors. You have done an amazing job, so which makes my job, my work as ambassador to the United States much easier. So now, ladies and gentlemen, let me give you a brief update on Vietnam and where it stands today in Asia Pacific and the world. You know, not long ago, I think most Americans knew about Vietnam as a war. Yes, we did undergo many decades of war in the last century. And we just have enjoyed real peace for less than 40 years now. But I believe that today more Americans know about Vietnam as a country, not as a war. And in fact, you know, Vietnam from war-torn countries have moved to a middle income and a vibrant and emerging economy with a market of 100 million consumers and an annual GDP growth rate averaging 6% for the past few decades. Vietnam has become a link of 15 important free trade agreements, FTAs, including the next generation FTA like CPTPP, the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, or mega FTA like Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP. In total, these FTAs integrate our economy with 60 other major and dynamic economies worldwide. We are also part of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, the IPEFs, launched by the Biden administration last year. And you know, last year, 2022, Vietnam's total trade volume hit a record of 732 billion US dollar. Those facts and figures can tell you how much Vietnam has integrated into the global economy. Vietnam is forecast to be among the world's top 20 economies and Asia top 10 economy by 2050. And it is less than 30 years. So I do hope that I will be around to celebrate the event. So on foreign policy, I can say that independence is a single word that characterizes our foreign policy. This roots from the thousands of years of Vietnam's proud history and embodies our strong national identity. We adopt foreign policies of peace, independence, and self-reliance, diversifications and multilateralizations of our external relations, proactive international integrations, and being a responsible member of the international community. We want to be a friend with all nations, with all countries, and a good and reliable and trusted members of the international community. So as a middle power country, Vietnam attaches great importance to international law and multilateralism. Therefore, you know, the United Nations and the associations of Southeast Asian nations, ASEAN, are the premier institutions that features prominently in our foreign policy priorities. On external relations, for your information, Vietnam has established diplomatic ties with 193 United Nations member states and having economic and trade relations with more than 230 countries and territories worldwide. As an active member of ASEAN and a responsible member of the international community, Vietnam has been playing a constructive role in over 70 key international organizations, international and regional organizations. And we successfully served the ASEAN chairmanship twice in 2010 and 2020, and twice in the United Nations Security Councils as a non-permanent member, and is being entrusted as a member of the United Nations Human Rights Council for the period of 2023 and 2025. Vietnamese peacekeepers are being serving in United Nations missions in South Sudan and the Central African Republic. That's about Vietnam. And let me now touch on the Vietnam-US relations. 28 years since normalization in 1995, the Vietnam-US relations are thriving across the board. The United States is one of our most important partners. We are encouraged that the US presidents and senior officers have emphasized times and again that the United States supports a strong, resilient, and independent and prosperous Vietnam, and respect Vietnam's sovereignty and territorial integrity and political system. The two countries are celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Vietnam-US Comprehensive Partnership this year, 2023. We can easily see progress and impressive figures of achievements in all areas from addressing war legacies to trade, investment, political security cooperation, and people-to-people ties. With the shared approach of shelving the past and looking forward to the futures. So since the normalizations, every sitting US president has visited Vietnam. In the phone call between General Secretary Nguyễn Phú Trọng and President Biden last month, just 2-3 weeks ago, the two leaders invited each other for official visits, which we hope will soon materialize. This week, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is to visit Vietnam. Yeah, he will arrive on Friday, and he will attend the groundbreaking of the new U.S. embassy premise in Hanoi on Saturday. Of course, he will meet with our leaders as well. So since I took office in D.C. February last year, hardly any month has gone by without important delegations coming back and forth between Vietnam and the United States. And even, my wife sometimes tells me complains that I spend more time with the delegations from Vietnam or the United States than with her. That's my problem. Yeah. So trade is an important pillar of the Vietnam-US relations. 10 years after we established the comprehensive partnership, our bilateral trade turnover grew fourfold to $138 billion last year in 2022, or 280 times compared to that of 1995 when Vietnam and the US normalized relations. So Vietnam has become the US 7th largest trading partner. As a sign of the maturity of our bilateral ties, a number of Vietnamese companies have set their footprints in the United States. Among them, VinFast made a $4 billion investment in manufacturing electric vehicles in North Carolina. And the Tin Thanh Group invested $1.7 billion in Thai retraining and recycling in South Carolina. I traveled to those states and witnessed those investments, which promised thousands of jobs for local Americans. And defense and security ties, especially addressing war legacy, also constitute another important pillar of the Vietnam-US relations, guided by the 2011 MOU on bilateral defense cooperation and the 2015 Vietnam-US Joint Vision Statement on Defense Cooperation. Addressing war legacies not only heals the wounds of war, but also helps build mutual trust between our two countries. During the 2021 visits by Vice President Kamala Harris and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin to Vietnam last year, as well as recent ones by the USAID Administrator Samantha Power and the CODEL led by Senator Jeff Merkley right now, he's in Vietnam. The delegations witnessed and also pushed forward remarkable progress in the cooperation of the two countries in accounting for MIAs, missing in actions, and dioxin remediations, Agent Orange, victim assistance, etc. Last but not least, our people-to-people ties are truly a great access to and sustainable foundation for our relations. Before the COVID-19, nearly 1 million American tourists visited Vietnam a year. Currently, over 25,000 Vietnamese students are studying in American schools or universities. On top of that, we are proud of the 2.3 million strong community of Vietnamese people in the United States. Vietnamese people or Vietnamese Americans, which is among the biggest and most vibrant Asian groups here. The Vietnamese government considers the overseas Vietnamese community an integral part of our nations. We spare no efforts to promote cooperation and reconciliations and to make sure that their continued success contributes to development of the American society as well as the Vietnam-US relations. Now, the Vietnam-US cooperation has gone beyond the bilateral framework to cover regional and global issues, ranging from climate actions, the COVID-19 pandemic, peacekeeping operation, nuclear non-proliferations, to maintenance of peace, stability, and prosperity in the Asia-Pacific and the world. As one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change, so Vietnam has been working closely with the United States, both bilaterally and multilaterally. We appreciate the U.S. financial and technological commitments to assist Vietnam in developing renewable energies so that we can achieve the pledged target of net zero carbon emissions by 2050. We are also grateful to the United States for the generous donation of over 40 million COVID-19 vaccine doses to Vietnam, which enabled us to quickly contain the pandemic and bring our people's lives back to normal. Vietnam and other ASEAN member states have been working closely with the United States and other partners to uphold international law, to maintain freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea, or we call it the East Seas, promote sustainable development in the Mekong sub-regions, and sustain ASEAN's centrality in the evolving regional architecture. I am proud that Vietnam actively contributed to the success of the US-ASEAN Special Summit in Washington, D.C. last year, and also to the upgrade of the ASEAN-US ties to comprehensive strategic partnership last year. A strong and united ASEAN is in the strategic interests of the United States because ASEAN matters for the United States and the United States matters for ASEAN. Realities have shown that solid Vietnam-US relations and cooperation not only serve the interests of our own peoples, but also contribute positively to the shared peace and prosperity in the Asia-Pacific and beyond. In a final note, may I share my strong conviction in the bright future of the Vietnam-US relations. And we cannot change the past, but we can definitely shape and build a better future for our children and for the world. The unimaginable progress that we have made together over the past 28 years tells us that Vietnam-US relations will reach new heights in the near future. So together, let us work towards those shared goals. So thank you so much for the attention. Thank you, Professor.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Zong, for a very inspiring and well-balanced, comprehensive speech about Vietnam's foreign policy, its role in the region, and, of course, the bilateral relationship between Vietnam and the United States. Before I start asking a few questions of the ambassador, and then after that turn to you in the audience to ask your questions, let me just say a few words about why I'm here. It's not because I was the dean of the Baton School. It's because of two kinds of relationships that I have had and very much benefited from with regard to Vietnam. In fact, as I was sitting here, I just thought of a third, and that was that when I was an undergraduate and took several courses on Asia, and that began my interest in the Asia-Pacific region, I took a course on political leadership in Asia. Unbeknownst to me that I would eventually become the dean of a school of leadership and public policy. Mm-hmm. And one of the leaders that we studied was Ho Chi Minh. Yeah. And so that began my interest in leadership and in Vietnam. In more recent years, I had the opportunity to be the chairman of something that was called the Program on International Studies in Asia, which was set up originally by a group of prominent American foundations to try to help countries, including China and Vietnam, who were entering a period of opening and reform, to develop their international relations studies and to help train some of their younger and more promising professors, scholars, and graduate students to learn about Western international relations theory. My first visit to Vietnam as the chairman of the Program for International Studies in Asia was to the Vietnamese Academy of Diplomacy, where I gave a few lectures on American foreign policy and also began a process of giving sharing some experience about curricular development in international affairs, because one of my prior incarnations was as a dean of the George Washington University School of International Affairs. And I remember the very, very warm welcome that I received from the students in the Academy of Diplomacy. One of the students who was sent from Vietnam to the United States was a young man named, and I'll anglicize his name, named VietnamUS. Viet actually lived on the lawn. My wife Shirley was spending a lot of time in Asia, and I had just had a stroke, so she wanted to make sure that in case of emergency, there would be someone there who might respond. Fortunately, Viet did not have to perform that role very, very often. but he was studying for a PhD in our politics department. And the question that he was investigating was a question that was very much on the mind of many Vietnamese at that time. And it'll be foreshadowing a question I will ask you, Mr. Ambassador. And that was, why did it take the United States much longer to welcome the idea of normalization of relations with Vietnam after our tragic war than it took the Vietnamese? The Vietnamese seemed to be much more willing to move on than Americans did. And Viet had the opportunity to interview both Senator John McCain and Senator James Webb, both of whom had very strong opinions about the issue, and they were on quite different sides of that political spectrum. Interestingly, Senator Webb, who had not served in Vietnam, was very skeptical about the wisdom of normalizing relations with Vietnam. Senator McCain, who, as many of you know, was a prisoner of war for many years in Vietnam, was much more eager to do it and to move forward. And so we could see how this was one of the reasons why it took America longer. Viet also played a role. He really loved being here, I have to say, as much as we loved having him live in our home, sharing that spare bedroom on the top floor of Pavilion 3. But I can also shed some light on that mystery that Damon was unable to answer about Thomas Jefferson's desire to get the strain of Vietnamese rice that could be grown in dry land, did not require rice paddies. Viet was so eager to pay back to UVA that he acquired a sample of that rice strain, contributed it to Monticello, and it is somewhere in their collection. And I encourage you to go to Monticello and ask for it. I'm not sure it's on display, but the more interest that is shown by those of us who visit Monticello, perhaps they will find a way of displaying it. So that is why I am here as someone who has done a bit of work with Vietnam and has enjoyed every visit that I've made, either as a tourist or professionally to Vietnam. Now, I will ask 2 or 3 questions, depending on the time and how things go. And so let me ask you that first one that I've already, as we say, telegraphed to you. As I've said, when I visited Vietnam and visited the Academy of Diplomacy, the most common question that I got, why is it taking you, why is it taking America so long to normalize relations? As you know, from the withdrawal of the United States, the final forces and those dramatic scenes of helicopters leaving the roof of the embassy in those days in Saigon, that it took about 20 years for us to normalize our relations, from 1973 to 1993-95. And so I'll ask you, why was it easier for Vietnam to do it than for the Americans?
Well, it's very, very, very interesting question, because I'm never thought that it was easier for one side or the others. I never thought of it. But actually, if it really was, I just guess, you know. There are several reasons, maybe. I have to think about it, but maybe the first lesson, the first reason is we are the winner. Maybe, or at least we thought we are the winner. So it's easier for the winner to forgive. Maybe. But the second reason, maybe, you know, the Vietnamese people say that Vietnamese people are so forgiving. Or maybe we had so many experiences. We, as I said, we have undergone so many decades of wars, not only with the U.S., long before with Chinese, and then with French, then with Japanese, and again with American, and then again with Chinese, etc. So we get used to to forgive him. Otherwise, we cannot live with anyone. So maybe I think that's it. Also maybe another one, but maybe the third one. Yeah, okay. Yes. Right at the beginning, you know, you refer to Ho Chi Minh. Ho Chi Minh always told our people to distinguish between American imperialists or imperialism with the American people. American people were not our enemy at all. You know, he was here. He worked in Boston and he learned. And I said earlier that he quoted the independence declaration of the United States. It means that how he loved the United States. He liked the way the United States. So I don't think the US is our enemy. So we, at the time, we all think that no, we cannot see the whole Americans our enemies. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So once you agree to approach us, to normalize relation with us, so okay, we accept that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Of course, there may be any various other reasons. We need to develop. We need peace. We need many things that that the United States can help, can provide us. That's also the reason. Yeah, I don't know if I can answer the question, but I just guess because it's a sudden. I never thought of that before. Actually, I never thought about it before. Yeah,
well, I think it's a very good answer, and I will share on my first visit to Vietnam, a senior member of your Ministry of Foreign Affairs asked the same question I asked you, and that many others asked. Why is it taking you so long when we are ready to move forward? And my answer was, because the Vietnam War is one of our longest wars. This was, well, of course, before Afghanistan and some of the other wars that we fought more recently, Iraq, Afghanistan, and so forth. It's one of our longest wars and about the only one that we admit we lost. And his answer to me was, yes, well, for Vietnam, it was one of our shorter wars and another victory. So it was pretty much the same answer that you've just given. Lots of experience, lots of success. And I must say also one last point before I ask you my next question, which actually will relate to the next question, is that, as you know, our partners in the Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific, China, often complain about the century of humiliation that they suffered at the hands of the West in the period from the end of the Qing dynasty well into the 20th century. I never once, despite all the wars, the periods, as you've said, of colonization, not dissimilar from what China experienced, I have never, ever heard a Vietnamese complain about being humiliated, because I don't think you ever felt humiliated. As one person explained it to me when I said, but you had these periods of foreign occupation and colonization and war, and basically he said, well, we simply survive, and ultimately the invader gets tired and goes away. And so again, it's a very interesting national narrative, which I think is worth considering as we develop this robust relationship with your country. My next question is this. Speaking of China, as you know, like you, we have had our ups and downs in our relationship with China. Right now, we are very clearly in a down period. So whether you wish to speak simply on behalf of Vietnam, or whether, and I know you have been involved in some of the senior officials meetings of ASEAN, on behalf of ASEAN, what would you like to see the relationship between China and the United States to be? Or we can put it the other way around. What do you want it not to be?
Well, you know, both China and the United States are big power and so important for Vietnam. China is our neighboring country, powerful. And we depend a lot on China, on economic transaction, on trade, on investment, on trade, etc. And you know, we are the only one in in ASEAN, having both land and sea borders with China. And our history was very complicated. Yeah. So we have learned a lot of lessons. So our relations with China are so important, so vital for us. We have to keep it. Yeah. But of course, as I said in my speech earlier, the United States is one of the most important partners in the world. The United States helps us a lot. Of course, we need the United States will help us to approach to get access to new and modern and advanced technologies, and a source of investment, and a huge market, number one export market for Vietnam, etc. So very, very important. Okay. So you see, you are in between the two superpower. What do you want? You never want they collide with each other on the back and sacrifice your interests, of course. But you also never want them to fight each other and ask you to be on their side, you know. So it's very conflicting. So what we want to see is a manageable and controllable relationship between the U.S. and China. Not so tension like this.
Right.
This is not our interest.
Right.
Yeah.
So some people talk about what they call the Goldilocks analogy. I don't know whether you know this kind of children's tale about Goldilocks, this little girl who loved her porridge or her oatmeal, but she wanted it not too hot, not too cold, but just right. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So if that's the case, and given your long history, your country's long history of dealing with this northern neighbor with whom you share, as you say, both sea borders and land borders, and who you've had everything from close relations all the way down to war, as recently as in 1979. What recommendations would you give to the United States about how to manage its relationship with China?
I think competition is not bad idea to have a competitions, but it's not good if we make the competition into war, turn it into war, even cold war or hot war. It's not good. Because competition doesn't mean you're racing to the best. You want to be better off than the other. But if war, you want to destroy the other, you know, you can be bad, but the other must be worse. That's the other way. So I think that, keep it that way. You should, you can compete with China. Okay, it's fine. But in a way that can be managed, can be controlled, not let any, misunderstanding that happen, and that would be very dangerous for not only for two countries, but for the whole world, No one like it. Yes. Yeah.
And one last question before I turn it over to the audience. And this was when we met in Ambassador Mull's office before going to the reception at Larry Sabato's pavilion. You talked a little bit about the prospects for closer and freer or more harmonized, to use an old APEC term, trade relations in the region. And I think you expressed some dissatisfaction with the level of regional trade arrangements, but you said, well, better than nothing. And could you elaborate on that? How would you evaluate organizations like APEC or the TPP and other proposals? And what would you like to see, and why do you still say what we have is better than nothing?
We very much hoped that we would get to the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, with the United States. But actually, the United States was the one who advocate the TPP, and we had to make a lot of efforts, and also sacrifice to get into the TPP. But then we was very disappointed when the United States withdrew from that agreement. Then, we already encouraged the U.S. to be there, to be present in the region more economically than not only focusing on the security and political and security or defense. Last year when the United States launched IPEF, at first, not only Vietnam, but other countries in the region was not happy with that because there's no market access element in that. But then for Vietnam, we thought that at least, this is a way that we can maintain and we enhance the U.S. economic engagement with the region. So it's good. And now, the IPEF is now under negotiations, and we talk about framework and other way. I think it's also good. Of course, it's not what we really striving for, like the market access, but I think maybe one day it will come. But at least now the IPEF is good enough. Yeah. So I think it's better than nothing.
Very good. Well, I see that Damon is ready to pass the microphone around. I hope you can also keep your eye on the time, because the ambassador and his colleagues and the ambassador's wife need to go back to Washington. It's not a quick trip. And from what I heard you say, I think that some of them would like to be home sooner rather than later. So I'm sure you have a estimated time of departure. I don't know what it is, but just when it's time to take the last question, let me know, and that will be the last one. Okay, who would like to start off with the questions? Yes, here, please. Why don't you identify yourself to the ambassador before you ask the question?
Hello, Mr. Ambassador. My name is John Guston. I'm an undergraduate fourth year at the university studying Chinese language and the history of East Asia. My question for you is, I understand Vietnam's position trying to maintain a friendly relationship with China, given your important trade partnerships and, as you said, sharing a land and sea border. However, over the past decade, Vietnam and China have encountered issues with Chinese ships arresting Vietnamese fishermen in Vietnam's exclusive economic zone in the South China Sea. I'm wondering if you foresee any Vietnamese cooperation with the US and the international community to try to mitigate these threats in the South China Sea and in the Gulf of Tonkin. Thank you.
Should I?
Please.
Well, thank you so much for the question. Actually, we are still concerned on the situation at the South China Sea because some of the activities that we don't want to see still happening every day now. The military exercises, land reclamation to make the artificial island and turn it into garrison, etc. That is not good for, and then there's some encroachment and also intrusion of our EEZ. Especially sometimes they send ships to approaching to the oil and gas operation that we are conducting, violating our territory. I think that's a source of concern. But of course, our policy is to settle all disputes by peaceful means, and we uphold the international law. So we have to cooperate strongly with other countries in the region, within ASEAN. Within ASEAN, we are now discussing with the with China on the code of conduct. We hope that there's some progress has been made, and we hope that we achieve that. That would help. And of course, we welcome the role of the United States in the present until because the U.S. we hope that the United States will have to keep the power balance, the balance of power in the region, and and also would have to uphold the international law, especially the UNCLOS in our region. So that's what we are look forward to our cooperation with the United States in that area.
Thank you. Let's go over here for yes, right behind my wife here. Again, please identify yourself before you ask the question.
I'm Malachi Hamilton. I'm in BRBGS. What you said, someone said before. And I'd like to follow up the question from what the other person said. Has Chinese and Vietnamese relations strained because of the conflicts in the Southern Asian Sea? Do you know if they strained or not?
Yeah. Sometimes, and the South China Sea is not the whole story. That all the relationship between Vietnam and China, we have many things else to do. And besides the dispute in the South China Sea, the rest is okay. Of course, we have also a problem with the trade because we have a lot of deficit. But in general, things are good. No problem at all. Yeah, only the South China Sea. So we will try to control the disputes there. Don't let it. We don't want to see it break out into bigger issues. Yeah, that's it.
Now, the gentleman right here. Yes, raise your hand so then give you the mic. There we go. No, here. I'm here. Right here.
Thank you. I'm Wyatt. I'm a first year at UVA. It was so great to meet you earlier at the reception. I was wondering what your stance is on the current crisis in Myanmar, and how you think that Vietnam and the U.S. can constructively move forward to try to address the conflict that is occurring there and the strife for a lot of people.
Thank you. The situation in Myanmar is really worrisome. Not only Vietnam, but all the countries in the regions. And the United States are concerned about that. And we have tried to help so fast. But, all of the measures that we have made seem to be in vain. All eyes now are looking toward ASEAN because Myanmar is member of ASEAN. And ASEAN right away, after the incident, the leaders met and decided on the 5-point consensus. That was also accepted by Myanmar as well. And now we are trying to make it move, to implement that 5-point consensus. But to be honest, it's moving so slowly. There's 5 points, but only 2-3 points that we can achieve. That is to have a special envoy of ASEAN go to Myanmar to talk with different parties and to provide humanitarian aid to the people in need. Some progress. Yeah, but the most important thing is that we bring all the different parties together for talks. That we haven't achieved that. And the military, the junta, they still kind of persistent on refusing that to happen. Yeah, that's quite worrisome. Yeah.
And I understand that I heard that we have some representatives from a neighboring high school. It looks like we may have some faculty members here. Do any of you have a question? Let's go ahead, right here.
Put your hand up high.
Here, you put your hand up high.
So I know if you were.
I'm not a high school kid. Hi, my name is Natalie. I'm a retired military staff sergeant. And my question is, if you stand neutral as America and China fight, all the embargoes and all the trade tariffs that you're dealing with right now, as America and China fight, and as long as they fight, all the tariffs and stuff that you are dealing with right now, those will weaken because China will be getting sanctions, and as they sanctions grow, you will benefit. Vietnam will benefit from it. So neither way, as you stand neutral, you still will win on both sides, from China or from America, because your financial economy in Vietnam will still grow you will grow financially, and and your economy will grow as well. So you will benefit if you take America's side or you take China's side from it. So the numbers that you gave are not true numbers, because those numbers are just those are infactual numbers. They're biased numbers. So how can you give a number when you know that those numbers are just baselines? So for somebody who actually work with ambassadors for multiple countries, I know that as you post a number, those numbers are not true factual numbers, because you say that you have tariffs on certain things and embargoes, which you do, but as America continue to fight, certain bills are going to be passed in your favor. So those certain things, so those numbers are not true numbers, because they're going to keep weakening, and Vietnam is going to get bigger, and they're going to keep getting stronger. So you're going to benefit no matter what side you stand. So you can't say that I stand neutral. Even though China controls your water and your land, because if you choose the U.S. gives you the other side. If you choose China gives you one side. So you can sit there and say one or the other, but you and I both know you're on neutral ground.
Well, thank you. I think we understand the question, and that is, if in the worst case there is a war, can Vietnam really stay neutral between China and the U.S.?
I hope not. I hope that there will be no war, no fighting between the two. Of course, that's number one. Number two, if that happens, I'm not sure that where Vietnam will be. It depends on the level of the fighting. Yeah. You may write that if we are stay neutral, we can benefit certain things, like if the United States impose some tariffs on China, so other American company will move to Vietnam, etc. Or other will fly Vietnam as an alternative for the Chinese market. But it won't last forever. Yeah. It will be very complicated. So as I said, that we don't want to see the fight between the two countries, the two big powers. Don't ask us to choose sides. We don't want to take any sides. We want to be neutral, of course. Not only Vietnam, the whole ASEAN countries, the whole region country in the region like that. But once happen, I don't know. Let's see at the time. It's of course it depends on how our interests at the time will be. So we will choose our interests. Let's choose the best way.
Very good. Let's take a question in the back of the room.
And this will be our final.
Okay. I have not called up. I've done right, left. Let's go. Anybody way in the back? Yes, please. Going to give Damon a little bit of workout here.
Thank you for coming here. So I'm Linz from Darden School of Business. So I have a questions here. So currently, all the 5 biggest FDI investor in Vietnam are from East Asia countries. So I'm just curious. I'm assuming that U.S. is the biggest country in the world, and it should be the investment should be commensurate with the measure, the size of the country. So what are the challenges that prevents the U.S. investors to invest more in Vietnam market, and how can Vietnamese governments address those challenges? Yeah, thank you.
Actually, according to the figures, you may see that the United States is now number 10 or 11th biggest investor in Vietnam. But it's not correct, because the U.S. investment into Vietnam through so many other countries. On the third country, like Singapore, like Netherlands, even the investment of Coca-Cola in Vietnam is not counted for the United States. It counted for some other transnational company with nationality in the other, not the American. So in fact, I think that maybe if you count fully, maybe the United States is not number one, then maybe number two, number three investor in Vietnam. Yeah, but still we are trying to attract more investment from the United States. You know, and recently there have been so many conference to promote investment into Vietnam, and they are very positive. Just last week, the US ABC here, the US ASEAN Business Council, led by Ted Osius, the former ambassador, he took a delegation of more than 40 US industries and companies to Vietnam, and the outcome was very, very positive. So I'm so optimistic that there will be more investment from the United States to Vietnam soon.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, Ambassador, my definition of a great program is one where the time runs out before the questions do. So I know I speak for everyone here to thank you for not only for coming to Charlottesville and to UVA, but thanking you for your introduction to Vietnam's foreign policy, your overview of U.S.-Vietnam relations, and above all, your candid answers to so many different questions. Thank you for coming. Thank all of you for coming. We hope you'll come back.
Yeah.
Enjoy the trip home.
Thank you for the question.
Mr. Ambassador, on behalf of the Center for Politics and the University of Virginia, we just have a small token of our appreciation for you being here today. It was a true honor.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Please come back soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much
Professor.
for the professors and students and yeah. Thank you for the question. I appreciate that.